Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Just a few housekeeping notes. It is my pleasure to introduce today's topic, your proven playbook for strategic energy procurement. We have partnered with Environ for NAM Energy, a program for our manufacturing members, because as we all know, energy is a fundamental resource for manufacturing operations and can take up to 1/3 of your operating costs. In today's volatile energy markets, manufacturers can't afford guesswork. So we're excited to have experts from Environ here to talk about how we treat energy like a financial market, cut risk, and make smarter procurement decisions. Joining us today, we have Courtney Duell, the COO of Environ, and Ben Walker, the VP of Market Analytics for Environ. So thank you both for joining us today. And now I will turn it over to you, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you all so much for joining this afternoon. We're very excited to have you all here. I hope you all can hear me well. Today, we wanted to spend a little time talking with this group about a proven playbook for strategic energy procurement. We really appreciate you all joining. We appreciate Anna and NAM for inviting us to be a part of this conversation today, and so we're excited to get started. As you all know, energy is a critical function for all manufacturing, and there's a wealth of energy topics that require your attention. But today we're going to dig into just a particular portion of that. We're excited to share some insight based on our historical experience of what makes a successful energy procurement program. All right. So before we dig in, we did want to give you all a little bit of background, familiarize you all with NAM Energy and make sure you understand our relationship to NAM in today's conversation. So we are NAM Energy is a combined partnership of the National Association of Manufacturers and Environ Energy. Environ has been partnered with NAM since 2008, and we recently published a best practices white paper, which outlines a playbook for building a strategic energy program. You can find more information in the link provided below, and you can see the agenda here that we are looking forward to, that we're going to talk more about today, predominantly just the energy procurement topic, but we also wanted to make sure that with the NAM program that you are aware that there are some other areas that we can support your energy needs for your organization as well, as you can see on this slide here. All right, if you could go on to the next slide for us, Jack. After today's presentation, if you're curious to learn a little bit more of the background of the solution set that encompasses NAM Energy, you can find that information here on slide 3 in the follow-up material, but we're not going to go into this today. So you can go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right. So thank you again for having me. Again, I'm Courtney Duell, and with me is Ben Walker. We have been working in the energy industry, advising clients of all shapes and sizes for a combined 30 years time frame, and we're excited to give you a little bit of insight into some of the best practices that we've encountered that prove to serve as a successful foundation for a strategic energy procurement program. Today, we're going to talk about just two of the aspects of the overall best practices framework, which includes building an energy team, and then digging into 3 of procurement's risks that all energy buyers should be aware of. All right. Okay, so for today, let's begin. We want to talk about that there is a wide variety of expertise needed to fully support a strategic energy program. Many organizations simply view energy purchasing as a price comparison exercise. It can be as simple as obtaining a few price offerings from supplier partners, picking one and just moving on from there. Unfortunately, this is a spend category that's really not that simple. Energy buying can come with some pitfalls and surprises and unintended impacts or outcomes. And in order to ensure that your energy team is actually giving enough attention and has the necessary amount of knowledge of the key areas, you may need to bring in a variety of team members to effectuate your energy procurement committee. The best way to avoid these various surprises, I'll go back one more slide, Jack, sorry. Not quite finished here. The best way to avoid surprises will be to make sure that you have the right folks paying attention to the right topics on this area. And we want to make sure that you understand what the key skills comprised in this team should be. So first of all, you need to understand the knowledge of how your business uses energy. This is a critical starting point to purchasing energy in a way that's optimized according to how your facility actually operates. This means someone in a facility management role is usually best suited to understand how your actual buildings included in your program consume energy. One common pitfall that is overlooked and creates unintended consequences in an energy procurement program is not accounting for known future changes in your energy consumption pattern or your total load. This can result in penalties or overpayments for usage premiums that really aren't necessary based on your future expected energy consumption. Your facility management team can help bring that insight into the equation. The second skill set is having the context of the financial priorities across your entire organization. This can be very impactful to making your energy buying decisions. A very common pitfall that we have encountered in our experiences is a difference in the priorities between the finance team or the budget of the organization and the desires or primary needs of the facility managers we mentioned before. Oftentimes a facility manager or operator is really focused on setting an energy budget and sticking to that projection. And in order to achieve that, that may come with some risk premiums that you have to pay to achieve a certain level of price certainty. That actually, if you had the insight of your finance team, you may find that that is not that highest need or that high level of budget predictability may not be necessary in your financial management of your organization. And without the insight of the finance team to opine on that, you may overspend in risk premiums. The budget could have a little room for some fluctuation, and you could reduce your total expense by properly navigating this. Having those right stakeholders in the discussion enables the clarity of multiple priorities that the program should be addressing. Third is a member of your supply chain. This person understands the company's processes for negotiating, contracting, and executing agreements. One of the challenges that we encounter oftentimes is the time that's required by an organization to actually go through an execution process. And this may not align with the dynamic pricing environment of purchasing energy commodities. These prices change on a moment-to-moment basis constantly. And if you communicate beforehand, before you get to the phase of actually being ready to execute a contract, you may be able to reduce stress for everyone involved in the process. And then lastly, you may have some additional stakeholders across your organization who should have a voice in the conversation, or at least bring awareness to other priorities that are happening within the institution, such as outside investors, a local law compliance team, your sustainability management team, or potentially someone who needs to communicate at the board level of your organization. With that, we're going to turn it over to Ben to dig into a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you. Thank you. And Jack, please go to the next slide. So what Courtney just described is bringing together multiple skill sets, often found in multiple people, to create a team and using that team to manage your procurement. One of the kind of important insights into this is once you have that team established, there's a variety of other efforts that they might be able to tackle, whether that's equipment replacement because of equipment being end of life, or whether that's an efficiency driven kind of asset cycling process, whether that's meeting building performance standards or any sort of resiliency or even sustainability goals. Those efforts all require the input of people with knowledge of how energy is used, the onsite, how energy is invested in, the finance team, how energy contracts are negotiated, the supply chain or contracting arm, and what that does to impact external parties or meet internal goals, the stakeholder team. And so bringing that team together allows you to do more things. We just want to highlight that for you. We're going to talk more about procurement today, and I'm going to go into that more. But just to highlight that this is often the way that team gets formed is through that procurement effort. And that's usually the first task that team tackles. But we don't just form that team and then disband once the procurement contract is signed and then kind of reform that team 2, 3, 4 years later when the contract renewal is up. We really look to do the best to bring that team together and then keep them in an ongoing effort to address many of the challenges that you have with your facilities. So next slide, please, Jack. Thank you, sir. So under the procurement, there are three main risks that we're trying to manage whenever we're looking to develop a program. The first is the commodity risk. I would say this is the standard thing that everybody thinks of when they think of energy procurement. So it's what is the price of energy? That itself is subject to a lot of volatility, geopolitical challenges, weather, supply and demand. A lot of potential management needs to happen of the commodity price. The second is the contract. So this is your counterparty risk, structural risk in how the contract is framed in the T's and C's, what line items are fixed or passed through, which Courtney will go into a little bit later. And then the third risk is really it's compliance. It's a way to look at, are you taking advantage of utility rebates when those sort of policies are developed? Are you in line with any sort of building performance standards or internal targets that you may have? So these are the three risks we're going to go into in a little bit more depth here. And on the first one of those under commodity, next slide, Jack, I want to highlight this kind of energy market hierarchy. So we like to think that, the price of energy is obviously what we see on our bill, but it goes through a few iterations before it gets to our bill. The price of energy is really controlled up at the investment bank level. So this is the wholesale market. These group own trillions of assets. And so you can kind of think of it as, trillions and billions and millions. So as we fall down this funnel, the investment banks have trillions of assets. They're who set the price of energy or do the price discovery. Your retail energy supplier with billions in assets is your conduit to those markets. That is how you access the wholesale market as it sits. And so their credit is very integral to the price that you get. Their ability to manage risk is also very integral into the kind of program that you're able to establish as your procurement approach. And then kind of at the bottom of that is the group with millions of assets, which could be you. It could be an aggregate group of you. And some of you may have assets that tip into the billions and, congratulations, right? I don't want to undersell you, but it's really, as we work down this funnel, you're further and further away from the trillions of dollars of assets that are setting the price of energy. And so when you are buying energy, the best results really come from using a similar financial analytics that you would use for other financial decisions, whether that's your own personal 401k or even kind of investment level at the organization, investment at the organizational level. And so we recommend that you just have sophisticated analyses when you take a look at what you're doing for energy. Next slide. So what are some of the ways that we would manage commodity risk? There are a variety of traditional ideas out there. What I'm showing here in the image is the current storage levels as of the end of October, right as we're exiting the injection season and about to enter the withdrawal season. And you can, you've all probably seen some sort of a storage chart before from, if you've done any sort of energy procurement, you've seen that before. If you're new to it, perhaps not. But there are a variety of these, I would call industry standards. Fundamental versus technical analysis, people will choose one or the other, but it's a way to indicate where prices might be trending. Supply and demand would be another one, right? What does our gas production look like next year? What is data centers coming online due to power prices? Those kinds of LNG exports for gas. Those are the kinds of supply and demand dynamics that you should be looking at. And then also weather forecasts. I would say these are kind of table stakes for the industry. Most people will look at these and take these into account as they're making their decision. We're really encouraging people to take that next step to go really to kind of enter that best practice area where we're not just looking at storage graph as a national level, but regionally specific. What is the gas storage and gas production and gas basis price for your region, right? So trying to look at where you are. Let's look at, what is happening not just with data centers broadly, but how is that impacting the PJM capacity market, for instance, right? So having that regionally specific data, having data transparency where, the suppliers are offering you the price that's determined at the wholesale investment bank level. There are a variety of partners. We're one that you could work with to take a look kind of behind the curtain. We purchase electricity and natural gas pricing data so that we have insights into how the wholesale market is moving and what the energy suppliers are adding on to that in terms of their risk premiums and their margin. So that's data transparency. And then also just understanding how potential and pending regulatory changes might be impacting the price of energy, as well as how it's delivered and what sort of line items you might be subject to. So those are some of the additional best practices. There's two more here on the slide that we're going to dive into. So another best practice element is using a portfolio approach. The days of kind of, fix it and forget it are kind of behind us. I would say that's, generations from manufacturing's, been the lifeblood of the US and of America for over a century now. And certainly in the early years, it was, purchase electricity kind of from the utility, and the price was the price you got. There wasn't much flexibility you had in how the utility would deliver power. And over the last few decades, we've started to develop this portfolio approach where you have the option to, because it's a financial market, you can use financial instruments. You can hedge your risk. You can take a partial purchase. There are forward curves that, or futures markets, where you can look at what the price is by month going out 10 years. And so you can use those financial instruments to create a portfolio approach. You can also use other on-site energy as part of your portfolio. And then also just kind of, again, exploring some of the more sophisticated analysis and more sophisticated analytics. We don't have time to go into a ton today, but I do want to highlight that, there's a variety out there, and we'll look at some very briefly. Next slide, please. Thank you, Jack. So looking at some of these, analytics that might help you make a decision. I mentioned, because there is this financial market, you have the ability to make financial choices. You can hedge your costs, whether you're making partial purchases or kind of at what level you're making those purchases, 20%, 40%, 60%. You can choose to do that based on the forward conditions in the market. You can look at available pricing. One important element of whether you are making a hedge or how much to hedge is your organizational risk tolerance. Again, that's why finance needs to be a part of these decisions. And then also just looking at how this impacts your business year over year. Sometimes, people might be more or less favorable for a strategy, depending on what it looks like to their existing budget. Markets right now are up, which has been a challenge for kind of 2025 here. But certainly, if we can find a chance to keep budgets stable and keep your business stable, we want to do that. The two images here on the left, I've talked for a little bit, so maybe you've already found your region, but you can see where the price has traded for electricity over the last 3 years. So each blue dot is 1 day's trade. It's kind of a series of blue circles. So that's 1 day's trade for that region for the price of 2027 power. And the diamond shows where we are today. So in upstate New York, it is among the diamonds on the right. It is among the most expensive days. When I made this chart, November 12th, it's among the most expensive days that you could ever buy power in upstate New York. And yet it's still cheaper than their neighbors in New England and neighbors in New York City, who are more in the middle of that range. So you have power prices, for the most part, centered or trending to the right. California is lucking out with cheap power right now. And then on the right, you have your natural gas trading history, right? And a lot of places there, we're seeing gas prices either centered or moving towards the left. And again, depending on where you are, we can kind of show more detail around the percentages of, is today's price better or worse than how many percentage of days? What does this look like for 2028, for 2026? And how do we use that to help make a decision around what amounts to purchase today? Next slide. Thank you, Jack. And so we do strongly encourage this layering in, this kind of, taking partial purchase and taking them spread out over time. And the image on the bottom left helps visualize what that might look like. So the height of the column is how much, in this example, natural gas, but it's how much energy you need to buy. And then the solid colors represent purchases that you've made, so hedges. And then the open bar represents how much you have left unhedged. So in this example, kind of at a glance, I can tell that this client is 75% hedged from January 2026 through the end of 2027. So 75% hedged for the first 2 years, and then it drops to a 50% hedge in the back 2 years. And they got there over multiple purchases, right? They had a few different layers that mostly look like 25% each, with the exception of kind of the green hedge one being a 50% starting hedge. So this is kind of the grid only approach. So back to the top bullet there. Most of these approaches use layered hedging, and they tend to have a 5-year time horizon. can be as short as 3 depending on market conditions, but in this 3 to 5 year range is where you tend to see the most common transactions. It's where the opportunity exists in the market. In a lot of ways, as an example, the natural gas curve is backwardated over the next 3 years, which just means that if you do a 1 year price, if you add months to that, you'll get a cheaper price. So a 2 year price right now is cheaper than a 1 year, and a 3 year price is cheaper than a 2 year. And so because of market events like that, you might see a 3 to 5 year approach. So that's kind of the traditional grid only approach. We are starting to see groups look to supplement their portfolio with, I'll just use the term non-traditional. So that could be on-site generation, that could be solar, that could be a CHP, that could be a fuel cell. Batteries don't really generate power, but they do manipulate your load profile. And so that would be another thing that can kind of support your portfolio, and or efficiency. So you could look to do some sort of load reduction is kind of the same as self-generation. It's just, you're moving that supply and demand really in the same way. But all of those can be used to be integrated into a more holistic offering and taking this portfolio approach. One issue is that these do tend to have longer time frames because they are asset driven. You're making investments in efficiency and equipment. And so that's often a 15 to a 20-year time horizon. But you really should be analyzing these just like you would analyze any other hedge, right? It might save you money, but it's the protection of the volatility. In most cases, they must save you money for you to take advantage of them. But incorporating the financial analysis of, if the market falls, we might lose money, but that's okay because we're protecting against volatility. If the market rises, we might save more money than we thought, but that's also okay because we're trying to manage our energy spend. So an example on the bottom right here is how you might analyze some sort of an on-site energy. So a PPA is a power purchase agreement. In this example, somebody looks to install equipment on site to generate power. And that's what they are staring at, a contract that says, we will charge you the blue line for every unit of power we generate. And they are comparing that against what would it cost for us to go buy that from the grid. So the cost to compare, the CTC. So that utility rate, the cost to compare, the yellow line, it's forecasted to start at 110 and drift up to 130 over the next 20 years. And the power purchase agreement is saying, I will sell you power for $80 in year 1, and that'll drift up to 105 by the end of the 20-year window. The blue rate is what you're fixing. The yellow rate can go up and down. And so you are potentially and probably and likely to save money. But you can see the history of the yellow that had a COVID dip where at one point, there was a 2-year window where you might have been kind of, underwater on your PPA. That's not to say it was a bad decision. It was just to say that this is a hedge that you're making against commodity costs. Next slide here. And Courtney, this is back to you.
I get to pick it up now. Yeah, thank you, Ben. All right, so the second risk that your energy team is responsible for managing is the contract risk. For any of you who are an energy buyer and have seen an energy contract, you know that there's a lot of legal jargon in those contracts. The price itself...
Courtney, it's harder for me to hear you. I don't know if it's me or you, but if you could lean in, that would be great.
Okay, sorry, I'll lean in a little bit closer. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, so the price that you're actually procuring in those energy contracts may only be a few characters out of a multi-page document. What might be lurking in all of that language is risk that your organization is really not intending to assume. For example, there's 2 or 3 words, very specific words, in a couple of our clients' contracts that made the difference of about $3 million for them during a recent market event that was weather related in the past couple of years. This is a significant risk as an organization that your energy strategy team must be familiar with and able to dig into those details of what is hiding in that energy supply contract. To achieve the outcome of what you're expecting, you have to take into account the price itself, of course, but the details of what is included in the price, what it excludes, what portions of the price are a fixed or set or static price, and what portions of those prices could change under what conditions, plus all the other aspects of the service that you're actually purchasing. So a best practice is to utilize some sort of decision framework, such as one that you see pictured here, to help you assess all of the critical aspects beyond just the price. Obviously, everybody cares about what is the price when you're purchasing energy, but there's so much more to it that you really need to be taking into consideration to have a successful program. You can see that in this particular decision framework, some of the key things that are considered are the contract terms and conditions, the billing practices of that supplier, the financial standing of that supplier, the risk management capabilities that they carry, if they have successfully transitioned or done accounting for billing for clients of your type. And then finally, the pricing. All of these things must be taken into equal consideration to achieve what you're expecting to as you endeavor into a supply contract. You want to make sure that the organization that you're partnering with has an adequate financial backing to ensure that they're going to be there to serve the full length of your contract term. The markets are a very dynamic, financially risky environment, and only the suppliers with the strongest financial backing will assure your success, that they will be there to serve the full balance of that contract that you're expecting to be purchasing through. All right, and then the next slide, if you would. We would be remiss to be sharing a guide on energy purchasing without spending at least a moment of time looking at the individual components of energy purchasing. So what you see on the slide here is electricity price components. There are different components for natural gas, but for today's exercises, we just wanted to look at electric for a moment. One of the things that you need to consider is that each of these pieces do make up your whole electricity price. And each one of these represent a different portion or magnitude of impact in your total spend, and each of these can be priced or billed in different ways. Becoming familiar with the specific stipulations for each of these individual components can be really critical to ensure that you're purchasing the product that you think that you're actually purchasing from a supplier. And it's back to you, Ben, for the next slide.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you. Jack, next slide, please. And we're getting close to the end of the presentation, so feel free to enter questions, but we wanted to review that last C, right? So we did the commodity. Courtney talked about contract review and the importance of looking at line items and ranking suppliers based on more than just price, as well as looking at pass-through components. And now we're going to talk about the compliance side of things. So there are a variety of elements that your procurement impacts. Obviously, it's your bottom line, the cost of the goods that you sell. But there's also elements of how your energy can impact the ability of your business to operate, right? So there are environmental regulations, building performance standards we've alluded to a few times. These are popping up around the country. Here's a map for you to look at both the city and the state level. They are essentially targets of emissions and or energy per square feet. They set some sort of a target or a limit, a threshold of that ratio of emissions or energy per square feet, and you must get below that threshold to be in compliance. If you don't comply, you are often faced with a fine. So it threatens your financial ability. At this point, I don't know of any that will actually pull your ability to operate, but they will enact some sort of a financial pain if you fail to meet these targets. These targets are directly tied to the energy use you have. And so taking a careful approach and understanding how your procurement, among other things, can support your ability to kind of meet and attain the requirement is really important. Many of you are likely familiar with demand response and the ability for you to use some of your asset and your operations to respond when the grid is at its really high priced hours. If you are using some sort of a backup generator, like a diesel generator, you run into air quality and environmental concerns with the amount of run hours you have available. So just understanding how to structure procurement contracts so you can participate in demand response is important. And then also making sure that your equipment is set up to appropriately participate in the demand response programs. And then if you are starting to track carbon emissions, whether that's for your own internal sustainability goals or as kind of the second bullet there around investors, whether it's kind of overseas investors. We're seeing a lot of pressure from both kind of the Eastern Asian, Japan types as well as European, but it can come from a lot of areas. There's kind of an increased scrutiny on emissions, scope 2 emissions being the emissions from the energy you purchase, which is predominantly electricity, although technically it can also be steam or other things if you're purchasing energy that way. And so understanding how your procurement can target your scope 2 emissions and how you can tweak your portfolio to reduce the environmental impact of your energy use. Again, these are kind of the sticks. This is where you have some sort of requirement that you must meet. The third bullet there is we are seeing, especially in some of the retail and automotive space, but kind of across manufacturing, more and more questionnaires where the people you are selling products to are asking you about your emissions so that they can report on their emissions to their investors or their stakeholders. So we're seeing more and more of those kinds of efforts where organizations and corporations feel the need to get a handle on their emissions so that they can better sell and serve their clients. So these are the sticks and the map on the next slide, Jack. This is kind of the carrots, right? So this is where you've got some incentives or a high cost of energy where, an efficiency might be a good play. So everything that's in green is a kind of a combination of high energy costs and or high incentives. So you would think, why is it green if costs are high? Well, that means there's a big opportunity that if we can find small demand improvements in your supply portfolio, we can really lower your energy rates. And also, incentives can take a few different guises here. So I tend to think of them as broken into two different groups. Feel free to disagree with me, but one way that incentives come out is kind of on the equipment side themselves. So this could be, some sort of incentive to install some sort of efficiency equipment, to do an energy audit, to hire an energy manager. So this is really focused on, something that is specific. Fuel cells that get some sort of a unique tariff rate, as an example, right? A way to incentivize certain equipment types. And then there's the other side where it's just a financing approach where if you become more efficient, you get a rebate or you get a grant to become more efficient. Or in some cases, you can just find a low cost borrowing, some sort of a loan that is or a lease structure that is kind of below market rates. So these are different ways for incentives to come out. We also, in some states, it's not quite aligned with the map here on the right, but it's pretty similar, are starting to see community solar. This is an incentive program where you are making anywhere from usually a 1 to 5 year, sometimes as long as 15 or 20, but you're making a commitment to buy energy from this community solar farm. And in return, you're kind of guaranteed a 10% discount off of the utility rate for that. These opportunities do exist. A lot of the ways that these opportunities are funded and financed by your local utility, which is usually the group who administers the program. There's usually an extra line item on your bill that you pay into this pot of money that then the utility distributes into these programs. And so in a lot of ways, you are already paying for many of these utility incentives, and we highly encourage you to kind of get your money back. It does help to reduce your energy budgets when you are able to take advantage of these. But again, this is where having that energy team approach can really help set you up for success so that you've already have the pieces in place to maximize these opportunities when they do appear. So that's kind of the end of the presentation of materials we prepared. Again, there is that best practice white paper that Courtney alluded to earlier, which is available online. It goes into some different detail. I don't want to say more. I don't want to say less. It just goes into a bit different detail than what we've covered today. It's in a written form. Some of you may prefer that as opposed to hearing this or seeing slides. But really, we encourage you to reach out, and if you're the kind of person that prefers conversations, we'd be happy to have that with you as well. So I'll pause here and we'll just kind of open it up. Anna, I don't know if any questions have come through, or if there's anything you'd like to add on to this.
Thank you, Ben and Courtney. As Ben mentioned, please do submit your questions now while they are online. You can either enter them in the chat box or using the Q&A function. Helpfully, Courtney and Ben have both provided their emails as well on this screen, so you are welcome to reach out to them directly. So while we are waiting for some questions to come in, I do have one that we get a lot here for you, Ben. And that is, how do we know when it's the right time to actually get started and lock in an energy contract? I know you talked through a lot of different options, but when is the right time?
Yeah, fair enough. So the easiest answer is it depends, which is not very satisfying. So, part of that is it's honestly a conversation. Because we have some clients now who are saying, hey, we're ready to lock in 27, 28, 29 because we've already hedged that layered hedge approach earlier, right? We've already got where we want to be for 25, 26. We've got our 75%. We really are exposed in the 28, 29 timeframe. We have other clients who are maybe rolling off of a contract, and they, hey, my contract ends in December. Can you help me with something? The answer is yes, absolutely. Um, there are times that we do have analytical tools to help you look at how the market is moving. And so for those of you who, the worst time to look at it is kind of when you need to, right? When the energy is when the energy contract's expiring, you don't need to wait for your contract to expire to reach out to us. We're happy to engage in the conversation whenever that is. But using these analytical tools to give you a sense of how the market is trending, where the risks might lie, and again, if the risk is the energy markets are going up, and yet we're still able to beat last year's budget, or you're still able to be operational and financially solvent at current rates, maybe we take a more aggressive position than if we really need rates to fall for us to kind of maintain our competitive advantage. So it's a bit of a nuanced answer depending on who you are, where you are, what your risk tolerance is, and really where you're at in your hedge portfolio. It's not. I wish there was an easy answer like tomorrow or December 12th. But it really just depends on the existing market conditions.
Well, I think this next question is somewhat related to this then for you, Ben. So, how far in advance are we talking about looking at for contract renewals? I know everyone like me has reminders set up on their calendar, but how far in advance should a manufacturer be looking at this?
Yeah. So in terms of how far in advance to look at contracts, um, I, honestly, anything within 24 months, you should already be thinking about and understand where the market is. So, if you're looking at a contract that's ending, end of 27, well, you are in. It is now time to start that conversation and to start that consideration. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to purchase anything in 2028 today, but it's certainly time to start monitoring that. I kind of mentioned this earlier that we tend to see gas and power in that 3 to 5 year window is where we want your eyes to be. That's kind of the horizon that lets us best manage your energy spend. Um, if you're looking at a contract renewal that is less than 6 months from now and you wait until that last 6 month window, that's probably the worst time. In part because once you get that close to a contract start, we can still help you. We're still happy to have a conversation with you. But you really have you've kind of let your options dwindle to the point that you have become what we call a price taker. You are subject to whatever the price is at that day, at that moment. And you have a lot less kind of volition and control over what the price might be. So really kind of the best time is in that 6 to 24 month window. If you're outside of that, we're still happy to talk and it's still, reasonable to look at it. But that's kind of the most straightforward without the it depends and there's reasons for exceptions if you want to go there.
That makes sense there. Earlier, always better. I think I don't see any more questions. So let me ask you one then before we end
Yeah.
the call, which is, and I know you can probably give many examples of this, but what are the biggest mistakes that you've seen manufacturers make around their energy contracts and energy procurement?
So was the question, what are the biggest mistakes?
Yes. Yep.
Courtney, do you want to take that or do you want me to take that?
Yeah. What should we not do?
Well, I can offer a little bit of thoughts, and I'm sure Ben has some things to weigh in as well. So, as Ben mentioned, one of the things that you do not want to do is find yourself in a situation where you're a price taker for sure. Waiting until the last moment or towards the end of a contract term when you're kind of backed up against a wall and feel like you have to make a purchasing decision is really not a good position to be in. The market may be in a very undesirable position at that point, and you just don't have any opportunity to wait and watch for a more favorable opportunity to transpire. And I would say another one of the biggest mistakes that we see made is not communicating effectively across an organization about the goals of an energy purchasing strategy. For example, though we mentioned in the beginning of the discussion today about how having the various stakeholders a part of the decision can be a really important aspect. If you aren't fortunate enough to be able to have an organization where you can get the right people into the room, at the very least, you can communicate outwards into your organization after a strategy has been implemented so that everyone's clear about what you are trying to achieve. For example, if you are tasked with making this decision and you are the engineering manager or the facility manager of your campus, and you make a decision to lock into a fixed price for 3 years for reasons X, Y, and Z, but then you did not actually communicate that throughout your organization, you can potentially run into a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking, which is a really stressful position to be in as an energy manager. And if you go ahead and just proactively communicate throughout your organization about what decisions have been made and why and what people should expect in terms of upcoming spend, price fluctuation, budgets, that can go a long way to ensuring that you have a successful program. That's just one aspect of how communication can be really helpful, but there are a number of examples where just communicating a little bit more about a topic that seems really mundane to a lot of people can be a really useful tool to success. Ben, do you have any other pitfalls you want to offer up?
I think it's just that contract risk is sometimes ignored, right? That understanding what line items are fixed and passed through, it 9 times out of 10, you're probably okay. But especially if you're looking to make significant changes to your facilities, you can structure a contract such that great, you became more efficient and the supplier gets all the financial benefit from that because of how the contract was structured. So I would just say making sure that you've got the right risk structure in your contract, given your future plans, would be the other pitfall to avoid.
Awesome. Well, I mean,
That's
not
maybe a whole
awesome, but
nother
thank you
webinar
for
though, Anna,
providing
because
this.
it's maybe a whole nother webinar
It's a
because
good
it's a good
question.
question.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. This sounds like a lot of do's and don'ts that we should go through another time. We have reached the end of our webinar time for today, though. Thank you, Courtney and Ben, for taking the time to share your expertise with us today. And thank you to all of our attendees for participating. This now concludes our webinar. Thank you all.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much,
everyone.
everyone. Have a great day.